So now we've got this working on our API, let's go to our client and configure this. So I'll just clean up the windows. And what we'll do to start with is we'll just open up our activity store and we'll start configuring this inside here. And what we'll do is we'll just add a const and set a default limit of 2 in this case. Doesn't have to be 2, but we'll do this so it's easy to see the effects of paging inside our application. And what we'll do is we'll create some additional observables, and what I'll do is I'll create an observable for the activity count, and I'll set this equal to 0 initially. And we also want an observable for the page number that we're on, and I'll set the page equal to 0. And what we'll also do is create a computed property to get the total number of pages. And in this particular example, if we've got our limit set to 2 and our activity count is 10, then our total number of pages will be 5. If our limit was set to 3 and our activity count was still 10, then our number of pages will be 4. And what we'll do to get the result of 4 is use the math ceiling function, which is going to give us the nearest round number to the result of dividing 10 divided by the limit here. And we'll keep it as 2 just for simplicity, but just for clarity what this function is doing, what we'll do is we'll say computed and get total pages, and we'll return math.ceiling or ceil, and we'll say list.activityCount divided by the limits. And what we also want is an action to set the page number. So I'll just create an action and call it setPage, and we'll take in the page as a number. And all we'll do here is just say list.page is equal to page. And what we also need to do here is pass in our limits and our page number to our load activities method so that we can pass them up to our API. So let's go down to our load activity method, and this is getting quite busy in our activity store now, so what we can do is just use the outline to go ahead and find our load activity in this case. And what we want to do in here is when we're passing, in fact we need the load activities, the pluralized one, not the load activity, and what we need to do is pass in our limit and our page to our activities list method. So we'll send down also the limit and list.page to our agent method. Now we're going to get an error because we haven't set up our agent.ts yet, so let's go and set this up in our agent file, and this is going to be related to our activities. So we also want to pass in our paging information as a query string in here as well. And just temporarily I'll just add them in as strings in here, and we'll look at a slightly different way of doing this very shortly, but for now, just to check the functionality is working, what I'll do is just pass in the limits, which is optional and it's a number, and the page, also optional as a number. And then what we can do, I'll just reformat, is after our activities we'll turn these into backticks so that we can format our string, and after the activities we'll add a question mark, and then we'll say the limit equals $, and we'll say limits, and then we'll add an ampersand, and we'll say the offset is equal to $. And then we need to add an expression inside here because we need to work out what our offset is going to be. And our offset in this case is going to be the limit times by the page number. And that's the number of activities we're going to offset in this particular case. So what we'll do is we'll say page, and if we'll add a ternary operator in here, and we'll say the page multiplied by limits which is optional, so we'll add the exclamation mark, or it's going to be 0. And what we're also doing here is we're returning a promise of iActivity, but this isn't going to work now. We need to change this so that we return a promise of our activities envelope. So let's head over to our activity.ts file. And I'm just going to scroll up to the top, and just above our iActivity, let's export an interface called iActivities envelope to match what we're doing on the server here now. And we'll specify the activities is equal to an or set to a type of iActivity array, and we'll also have the activity count, which is going to be a number. And inside our agent, what we'll do is we'll adjust our promise here. So instead of returning the iActivity array, we're going to return the iActivities envelope. And then we'll need to go back to our activities store and make a further adjustment to our load activities method to accommodate the fact we're getting an object containing the list of activities as well as the activity count. So back in our activities store, in the load activities method, what we're getting back now, instead of activities, we're going to get back an activities envelope. And what we'll do is we'll just destructure the activities and the activity count from this, what we get back from the server here. So we'll say const activities and activity count equals activities envelope. And what we also want to do is set our activity counts to the activity count observable. So still inside the running action here, what we'll do is we'll say list.activityCount equals activity count. And what we should find now after that refactoring is that we're returning activities, but we should see that we're only getting 2 activities back from our server. And if I take a look at the browser, we can see now we're just getting our 2 activities back from our API. So far so good, and what we'll do next is we'll implement the user interface so that we can go and get more activities and build up a list of activities, so as we scroll down the page we can select new activities to load, and we'll take a look at that next.